Um, this little book that we put together was by testimony before the United States Senate on the origins of the Constitution. Indian people have been telling me for years and years that many of the main ideas for the U.S. Constitution actually came from American Indian people. And I said, what? I didn't learn anything about that in my school book. Did you learn about it in your school book? I never saw anything about that. Didn't say anything about the Indians giving main ideas for the U.S. Constitution. Not one word about it. And I told him, I said, well, once again, I'm from Missouri. You're going to be making statements like that. You better be able to back them up. So we sat down with the Constitution and the Great Law of Peace, and this was with the long-time related or associated tribe with the Lenni Lenape, the Iroquois Confederacy, and we went through with their Great Law of Peace, and we found line by line, article by article, section by section within the Constitution, exactly where the parallels were between the U.S. Constitution and the Great Law of Peace. And when we brought this before the United States Senate, and let me tell you, it was a little nerve-wracking to walk into that Senate. But I told myself, this is my house. These senators, they're my employees. I'm the boss. This is the government of the people, for the people, and by the people, and by golly, I'm going to try to keep those guys honest. So when I went in there and testified, I have to confess, I tied a little string around my knees to keep them from knocking too loud. But when I got done testifying side by side with the chiefs, much to my surprise, the United States voted 100-0 to officially recognize for the first time in history that many of the main ideas for the U.S. Constitution actually came from Indian people. And that the very structure of our government in our three-part system was explicitly modeled after the Indians' Confederacy. The House passed it, the President signed it. It is the official policy now of the United States government. That's what's in this little book. And then we had the challenge of trying to get it in the schools. And I found that that was a high hurdle. It was tougher to take on the Congress than it was to take on the school boards. But school by school, we gradually have begun to make some headway, and I'll pass these around. Now, what got me into all of this was what happened in 1976, the bicentennial of the Declaration of Independence. I was a young college student at the University of California at Santa Barbara. I was over visiting a friend of mine, and the telephone rang. And it was an elderly woman, 83 years old, named Susanna Morgan, who casually mentioned to my friend that she had some old family papers and wanted to find an historian to look into them. My friend said, well, what a stroke of luck. I have a young historian sitting right here. A meeting was arranged between myself and a lovely grandma. I expected to see something like Uncle John's love letters to Aunt Mary. I didn't have high hopes, but out of courtesy, I went. And what she revealed to me were original, unpublished letters written by George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benedict Arnold, John Hancock, Aaron Burr, papers related to Ben Franklin, Patrick Henry, the real McCoys, the authentic documents, unpublished, that except in their family, the world had never seen them. And then after some months, we found the mother lode, an old trunk up in Grandma's attic filled with Revolutionary era documents, including the diary of her late husband's great-great-grandfather, George Morgan, the first Indian agent for the Continental Congress, that just lived a few blocks from here, was a neighbor of Ben Franklin's. And he became the first Indian agent for the Continental Congress. And we found the actual transcripts of the first U.S. Indian peace treaty in 1776 with his ancestors. At that treaty, there was a wampum belt exchanged with 13 diamonds and 2,500 wampum beads. There was 2 of them that were made. One went to his ancestors. The other one went to the Iroquois Confederacy's ancestors. And when I was working with the Iroquois Confederacy in upstate New York, I was talking to a man named Corbett Sundown, who was the chief of the Senecas. And I was telling him this story that I'm telling you tonight about this 13 diamond wampum belt. And I said, well, Chief Sundown, have you ever heard of it? He says, well, we got it. I said, what do you mean you got it? We got the treaty. We got that wampum belt, that 13 diamond belt. We got it. I said, oh my God, how on earth did you come to preserve that? He said, you know, for years and years, the Tonawanda Council of Chiefs, we paid this bill to this bank. Year after year after year, we paid this bank a bill until one day I said, well, boys, you know, all the boys were 80, 90, 100 years old. I said, well, boys, how come we keep paying this bill to this bank? And somebody seemed to recall, they said, well, I think we got a safety deposit box. Really? Well, what's in it? Nobody could remember. No one had actually seen inside the box in their lifetime. It was from previous generations. So they said, well, let's get in our pickup and go down to the bank and see what we got. So they went down to the bank, and one of them still had the key. And they went in there and they opened up that safety deposit box, and inside, the original wampum belt, the 13 diamond belt. It still exists. I don't know if you have a safety deposit box, sir, but if you do, I suggest you go down and check it, because his tribe was given one too. And it might still be out there somewhere, someplace. Each and every one of us need to sometimes check around our attic. We never know what we might have. So Kevin Costner read this book, and one day I got a telephone call from Kevin Costner, and he calls me up and he says, hi, this is Kevin Costner. I said, well, hi, this is Mel Gibson. I said, no, this is really Kevin, he said. I said, well, this is really Mel. Now, who is it? Because, you know. And so, to make a long story short, he read this and he thought it was a pretty good, interesting story. And so he flew me out to Washington, out to Hollywood. And I thought to myself, gosh, I guess I should have been a little more polite, you know. He's going to send me, maybe this really is Kevin Costner. So I got out there, and he had read this, and he asked if he could hire me to become a script writer, because he was producing an 8-hour television miniseries for CBS. And so I worked for him for some time as a script writer. It was quite an honor. It never got the same kind of play as Roots, because CBS was scared to present a documentary on network television. It was the first time in history they'd put a documentary on network television, so they scattered it out over a period of months. It could have got a bigger momentum going, but it was an honor to work on that project, and this book was one of the ones that was profiled.